every morning with drive. Being on the grind, know I had to survive. We had to win. Started from the dirt and the rubble. I had to be the needle that was popping your bubble.
Hello and welcome into the Rookie Prospect Profile Series, a Zilla Fantasy Elite production. Thanks for tuning in. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, smash that like button for this series. Today, we're going to be looking at running back Israel Abanikanda. Israel Abanikanda was drafted number 143 overall by the New York Jets. They come into the league out of Pitt as a Pitt Panther. Looking at some of their physical traits, we see that Israel Abanikanda comes in at 5'10", 216 pounds with a BMI of 31. They have a 40 time of 4.50, giving us a speed score of 102.4. Putting these physical traits into the R Studio model, we get a prospect score of 15.497, which ranks 55th overall out of the 310 running backs in the R Studio model's database. And shifting over to see who are the closest comparables at that particular R prospect score, we see that the next best is Keyshawn Vaughn, and two better than that, Felix Jones, then Carlos Hyde, J.K. Dobbins, and Rachaad White, 5 better than that score. Looking at the 5 below that, we have DeMarco Murray, Latavius Murray, James Conner, Kerryon Johnson, and Sony Michel. So definitely a lot of high-hitting prospects in that particular range, 15.497. That's the 82nd percentile in terms of prospects there in the database. So little comparables there for Israel Abanikanda. I think he fits some of those guys pretty well in terms of James Conner and Kerryon Johnson, what those guys brought to the table, and kind of how they operated in their game. Switching now to the machine learning model for Israel Abanikanda, we can see that he comes in with a mean of 12.44, a median of 12.37. Their minimum prediction was at 7.35, and their maximum was at 17.29. Looking into their percentile outcomes, their 10th percentile outcome was at 9.94 fantasy points per game, 25th percentile at 11.33, 75th percentile 13.55, and their 90th percentile outcome at 15.06 fantasy points per game. And we see that mid-50 gap at 2.22. That's actually ranked 4th best out of all 36 prospects. Again, that mid-50 or M50 gap there is really the gap between the 25th percentile and the 75th percentile outcome. The smaller that number, the more predictions that the model was putting in a narrower range. Considering Abanikanda's mean, if we head over to the ranks here, considering his mean was at 12.44, ranked number 8 overall, and he has the 4th ranked M50, he actually has a really good ratio in terms of that Mimi 50, which is really identifying how good is this prospect and how good do we think the model is kind of fitting the data. The higher the mean, the more likely that gap between the 25th and 75th percentile is going to be, just because they're larger numbers that you're dealing with. But the larger those numbers and the smaller that M50 gap, the more precise you can kind of think that this prospect was producing outcomes within the neural network. So that's kind of how Israel Abanikanda was operating in terms of those numbers and those ranks, getting into those ranks a little bit further. Number 8 in the mean and median, number 11 in terms of their minimum prediction, and number 11 in their maximum prediction there. And as we stated earlier, at that mid-50 gap, 4th overall. So good to see those rankings for him there. Landing spot was a little bit poor, but getting into some of those numbers in terms of the mean, median outcomes and the max outcomes, we're going to look at the prospects and their career outcomes. So that median and min there at 12.44, 12.37, that's the average outcome that it's spitting out. What kind of profile looks like that, or what kind of career arc could we be looking at? Raheem Mostert's career best, 12.46. Bilal Powell, if you remember him, 12.3. Devin Singletary, 12.3. Rashad Penny's best season actually at 12.17. He's had some big spurts there Travis Etienne so far, 12.06. Javonte Williams, 12.05 so far in their career. Getting a little bit further above that 12.5 mark. We're looking at Rashad Jennings, Isaiah Crowell, Ronnie Hillman. Damian Pierce last year was at 12.8. So those are some of the numbers a little bit further ahead there in that range. But that's the kind of outcome, mean outcome for Israel Abanikanda in his career would be somewhere in that range. And looking at that maximum of 17.29, who is that comparable to? Well, 17.3 is James White's best career. Dion Lewis, 17.2. Reggie Bush, 17.1. Eddie Lacy, if you remember him, he was at 17. Exactly. Trent Richardson, 16.98, and then getting a little bit above that 17.3 range. Nick Chubb's best season, 17.31. Mark Ingram, 17.4. David Montgomery, 17.65. So that's kind of where they're predicting Israel Abanikanda's maximum output during his career. Really, that's going to do it for today's rookie prospect profile on Israel Abanikanda. Hopefully these RStudio models and this machine learning model give you a little bit of that additional confidence in the analysis that you're doing for each of these incoming rookies. Again, that's going to do it for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is presented by Zilla Fantasy Elite. Have a good one. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Yeah, whole crew on top. Really, we on top. Wake up every morning with drive. Been on the grind, know I had to survive. We had to win. Started from the dirt.